Now the Ping i500 from 4 years ago was definitely one of the better compact distance irons you could get on the market at the time. It had that hollow construction, so it gave you a really good, powerful, explosive feel, while also being nice and compact down behind the ball to appeal to the slightly lower handicapper. But 4 years on, there's a new version out for 2022. It's the Ping i525. I've got it here, and I've got to say, looking against the old 500, you might think, actually, these two irons don't look all that dissimilar, and you'd be right, but actually, Ping have made 4 key changes to the design of this new i525 inside the head that they say move it on in terms of feel and performance compared to the i500. So the first, we've got a new face design, so it's a little bit thinner, it's a little bit more springy, it's been redesigned to give you a little bit more speed. The second is we've got tungsten toe and heel weighting here, so it should be a bit more stable on those off-centre hits. The third change is Micromax grooves. So you see here, there's actually 4 more grooves on the face. We saw that with the new i500 iron to give you less flies from the rough and better spin consistency in those long irons. And the fourth one is an EVA polymer material inside the head, which is said to dampen vibrations and give you a softer feel. So 4 relatively big claims from Ping in terms of how they've moved the performance on from i500. I'm going to give this iron a thorough test here on the 17th hole at Burley Park Golf Club up against the i500 from 4 years ago to see exactly how the performance has evolved and try and validate those claims and see if there is some tangible benefits or improvements into the i525. So let's hit some shots and see how they get on. Before we hit some actual shots with these clubs, let's just touch on the looks, because you won't be forgiven for noticing that the fact that these irons actually look very similar, and from the back these irons have a very similar shape. The only real difference is slightly different tone to the finish of this i525 and this kind of textured section on the back. Let's face it, the i500 was an excellent looking iron, so they didn't really change too much, and they haven't, which is a good thing. Obviously you will notice those extra grooves down behind the ball at address, and for me actually, because those grooves are smaller, they're less visible, and you'll notice on i500 there was a nice thick white bottom groove which I thought helped with alignment, and while there is a white bottom groove on i525, it's less visible, so you could argue the i525 is more difficult to align. It is also slightly more refined, slightly more compact. The top line's definitely thinner, but other than that, you know, looks wise, it's very similar to i500, which I don't think is a bad thing. It's definitely going to appeal to the mid to low handicapper who wants to look down on something slightly smaller, but also wants to get good distance out of their irons. And that's because these irons are lofted at 30.5. They haven't changed the lofts moving from i500 to i525. It's the same loft, same spec of club. So let's hit some shots. You can see I've got 3 balls here with each club. Going to hit some shots down to this pin, 160 yards away, and slightly into the wind. And what I'll do is, before we hit some shots, I'll just flash up the launch monitor data we got testing at AF Golf Studio in Peterborough. We got on the Tadman launch monitor, and you'll see from those initial numbers, hitting 10 shots with each, the performance really isn't that much difference. I got very similar ball speed with the i525 against the i500. Launch was similar. The spin did come down by about 200-300 RPM, but that's because I am testing in a different shaft. You'll see here I've got the Project X IO shaft with the i525, so that could be a contributing factor, but it definitely did spin a little bit less for me. And in total, all in, I got 1 yard extra carry from the i525. So initial thoughts are, perhaps the performance hasn't moved on a great deal, but Ping are saying it's more about the feel and the forgiveness you get from the club. The consistency numbers I got on the Tadman were very similar, so I didn't feel like i525 was any more stable or any more forgiving, but it'd be interesting to hit some shots down to this flag and see where they finish, see how consistent that distance is, and also the dispersion as well. So let's hit some shots with each and see how the feel compares, and then also how the performance compares as well. So starting with i500. It's a pretty good strike, just left of the pin. Come up fractionally short, but has quite a metallic clicky sound to it, I think. So it'd be interesting to see how the i525 compares. So I think that's one area the i500 could have improved, was offering a slightly more pleasant, softer feel that golfers tend to want to experience these days. Let's see if this i525 is any different. Oh, It's got a lot more oomph behind it. Go straight to the pin. Looks to have carried a bit further. I don't know if you picked that up on the microphone. Definitely feels a little bit more powerful. I wouldn't say it was soft, but it wasn't quite as clicky as the i500. So definitely some changes there that I've noticed. Let's hit some more shots with each of these balls and see how we get on. Okay, so that's the 6 shots hit, 3 shots with each, i500 versus i525. Let's go down to the green and see where they finished. Okay, so we're up by the green here after my 6 shots hit into this pin. It's worth noting I did hit a few practice shots just to make sure I was the right distance. The pin is into slightly off the left, and you see here my 3 shots with i525. We've got a couple here just left of the pin and one a bit further to the right. It's noticeably longer, these shots, than the 3 shots you'll see here with the i500. So there's a bit of disparity with what the launch monitor was telling us. It was about 1 yard longer, but out on the course you'll see in this situation it's about 3 to 4 yards longer. I think that's partly because i525 definitely gave me a slightly flatter ball flight and obviously a little bit lower spin as well. And those 2 factors contribute to a stronger trajectory when hitting into the wind, crosswinds. You're getting a bit more distance with those factors kind of factored into the situation. So clearly a little bit longer with i525. Worth pointing out that shot over there to the right of the pin was a slight miss hit and it just pushed to the right. The wind kind of carried it to the right. Wasn't expecting it to reach the green, to be honest, but it's got pretty much pin high. So that was a surprising result. Definitely seemed to be a bit more forgiveness, a bit more stability factored into that head, which has given me a bit more margin for error on those slight off-centre hits. Don't get me wrong, those shots with i500 were pretty good. They were quite straight and they were quite consistent, but they were coming up noticeably short versus i525. So if you want a bit more distance, clearly i525 is delivering that over the i500, and I think part of that is from that nice lively feel off the face. Definitely feels a bit hotter off the face compared to i500. That's translating into a bit more distance for me. So hopefully this test has given you a bit of an insight into what i525 is all about. A perfectly enjoyable club to hit for the mid to low handicapper who wants a bit of extra distance from a club that isn't overly chunky down behind the ball. It's nice and elegant, slimline, but has a lot of forgiveness and ball speed built into it. Let's face it, not drastic improvements over i500. i500 did set the bar very high, but with this club being 4 years in the making, I was potentially expecting a little bit more, especially compared to the G425 club. We saw it from the data that I flashed up earlier. Actually, G425 offers similar performance, but obviously this one offers it in a very different looking club. So if you want similar kind of levels of distance and forgiveness, but in a smaller package, i525 is delivering that. Compared to those 4 different technologies that Ping were talking about in terms of how they've moved it on from i500, I think you could definitely make a case for the feel being slightly better. Feels a bit more lively. Does it feel softer? That's subjective. For me, you could argue that it was slightly softer, but there wasn't much in it. Is it more forgiving? I would say probably is. It definitely felt a little bit more stable on those slight off-centre hits, and that shot that we hit right of the pin kind of exemplified that. Is it going to give you more consistency out of the rough? Better spin on those long iron shots? I think that's something that you're going to have to find out for yourself, but from the testing I've done on i500, which has a similar face design and similar groove pattern, I would say there is some merit to that technology. It seemed to be the case with the i500 irons that I've now got in the bag. And the last technology was that new face design. Is it giving you more ball speed and distance? Well, we've seen here from the testing that it is giving you a little bit more distance versus i500, and it seems to be as consistent. So that's the most important thing. Yes, the extra distance is nice, but is it hitting that number consistently? Well, I would say yes, and that's coming from the extra ball speed and a little bit more stability, but not massive kind of evolutionary changes with i525, but a very pleasing iron to hit nonetheless. It is a bit more expensive than i500 from 4 years ago. This is £180 per club in steel, so it's around about £30 more expensive per iron. So a little bit more pricey, but you kind of expect that with the way prices are going with golf clubs these days. And I think, you know, if you're a relatively consistent ball striker but just want a little bit more assistance, maybe you've got a relatively slow swing speed but you like the look of a smaller iron down behind the ball, the i525 is a really nice option from Ping. It looks pretty good down behind the ball and in the bag. and I think it has a nice blend of performance attributes that that sort of golfer is looking for. So that's all from me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do click the like button if you like what you're watching, and comment down below, has this video been helpful in you ascertaining what the performance is all about with this i525? I'd love to hear from you. But that's all from me, from Birdie Park Golf Club. I'll see you next time.